Greetings, Mount Zion. Pastor Bo here. Welcome back to our IMITATE section of our series that we're currently going through. So we have been looking a lot at Jesus' attributes and how we can imitate them in our own lives. Today, we are looking at the character or the attribute of compassion. Now, when we think of God, a lot of times we look at him as being omnipotent or all-powerful, omniscient or all-knowing, and omnipresent or ever-present. These things are all true, but when we look at Scripture, we see how God describes himself in Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7. The first thing he mentions in this text is that he is compassionate. Now, the word compassion here is rahum in the Hebrew. It's the root word meaning female womb. And the idea behind it, it's sort of like a feeling a mother has toward her child. So the image of compassion that we see in the Old Testament is that of a nurturing God. A few scriptural examples of this can be found in 1 Kings chapter 3, specifically verse 26, or in the book of Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 20. And then when we transition and we look at the life and ministry of Jesus in the New Testament, this really shows us a lot about Jesus's character. And again, one of the main attributes that we see is Jesus's compassion towards others. So when we look at and read the Gospels, compassion by Jesus is always followed by action. Some scriptural examples for this point can be found in Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 42, or in Matthew chapter 14, verse 14, or in Luke chapter 7, verse 13. Just please take a moment and look up these examples and discuss them amongst yourselves. In all of these examples, we see the same Greek word that is used for compassion. Basically, how it's said is splanchnizomai. It literally means to have your bowels yearn. It's like you feel something in the deepest part of you and you are moved towards action to help meet a need. Something to think about with this is, when we look at compassion, sometimes it may cause our lives to be interrupted. But with compassion, a life may also be changed. When we look at the example of Jesus, he did not see people who came to him as an interruption, but rather he saw it as an opportunity to show compassion. How are we doing in this area, church? How are we doing? Another point about compassion that we see in Scripture is that sometimes it costs us something. We can see this in our main text today, which is the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. Many of you are familiar with this text. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. If you haven't read it yet, pause and take some time now to read it as a group. So at the end of this parable, Jesus asked the lawyer, which of these three men were a neighbor to the one who had been robbed? The answer for us to see, it was easy, but it was hard for the lawyer and the other hearers to comprehend. The enemy was the hero in this story. The neighbor to the man who was robbed, it was the Samaritan. I have a good feeling that this parable opened up some eyes in Jesus' day. It should still be doing the same with us today. The point of Jesus' parable here is this: anyone that is in need is our neighbor. Anyone who helps another in need is our neighbor. And anyone who helps us, guess what? They're our neighbor. As you go through the discussion guide, really take time and pray about who God may be calling you to show compassion towards today. Thank you all for listening, and God bless you all.